This is the ZMAR Podcast. Elite Benefits of America helps small and mid-sized companies with their health insurance programs. And now, your host, Butch ZMAR.
Today I'm going to talk about running. The weather is actually getting better in Chicago for it. I just have not made the time to get out there and run, but it correlates with a benefits story that I'm a case study actually. So you listen in. This company that I want to talk about is roughly about $60,000 in savings even after 3 years. So it'd be something worthwhile listening to how we strategize and how we move forward with that, and maybe it'll work for you. But I want to start out talking about running. It is a little bit of a passion for me. I'm a big scuba buff, and now my kids play hockey, but somehow running has always been there. You know, the weather changing is definitely a constant reminder for me to get out. I kind of got off the bandwagon. Life got in the way. Busy sports, busy work, busy life. And so, you know, why does somebody run, I guess? You know, they always talk about this runner's high, and that's true to a certain degree. And a lot of people eventually will encounter that, but it's just more of your body reacting to that length of run. And it could be a mile, it could be several, but it kind of puts your mind in a daze, which is another reason that people run, just like any other sport activity, kind of puts your mind in another set. And I always say, like, when I run, I don't normally use or bring an MP3 player or listen to music. A lot of runners do, and I want to say most do, but very few don't. There's some safety reasons for that. You know, you can hear cars coming and noise in the background. Plus, it's always nice, you know, to hear the outdoors, right? Like maybe birds or whatnot. And so that's nice. But I always say the music between your ears are usually the best music you can listen to. If you think about it, some of the training runs that I've done, and then even the long runs, you're talking about you're running between 5 and 15 hours. That's a lot of alone time to try to figure things out, right? And so your mind can wander in so many different spots, your goals, right? You know, your relationships, a whole bunch of stuff. But definitely the outdoors. I mean, I have some ambitions to still continue to run, even always as much as 100 miles. There's a run in the Florida Keys. I would love to run along the highway in the Florida Keys and get that sea breeze going across the highway. I think that would be fantastic. I also want to run in the mountains. So like go to Colorado and run or even bike. I would love to cycle. There's a lot of cycling races up the mountains there. I think that would be awesome. And then there's several other goals that I want to meet before I can't run anymore, and then maybe transition over to cycling. But running is also not for everyone. And so why, right? And so most of the runners I've met that said, yeah, I just not a runner. I just don't like it. I hate it. Most of them just haven't given it enough time. And just like in business, sometimes we make moves faster than we should. We need to stay the course a little bit longer. So I may be generalizing what a lot of runners that say that running is not for them, but a lot of them, if it ends up becoming a goal, like they want to run a marathon or whatever their goal might be, a lot of them end up starting to enjoy running. Not all of them, but a lot of them will all of a sudden say, hey, this is something that I've never experienced before, and they end up enjoying it. And even if they're not running 26 miles ever again after their marathon, but they're running 5Ks. And then, of course, the new joke is ultra 5Ks. But 5Ks, 3 miles, right? Even if it's just a mile, like they become runners at that point. And just because you don't do 26 doesn't mean that you're not a runner. So once you accomplish your goal, running is running, right? So 1 mile, 100 miles, it doesn't make any difference. We're all the same. What's the training like, right? And so some people to get started, and some people like myself, I got to get moving here. Spring's here, and I have some goals. I want to try to get to 40 to 50 miles a week and running by the end of the summer season before hockey season starts up again. But life will take its toll a little bit. But even if I get to 30 miles a week, I think it's a good accomplishment, and it'll set the pace for the following year where I want to go after that 50-mile run again. And so no one starts, from zero and goes to 100 miles without some training. And training can take a long time. You got to have patience, right? And baby steps. There's going to be a lot of growing pains, just like in business and the topic I'm going to talk about of, just got to be patient and work the work and just let the path take its path. And so there will be setbacks along the way. So you're going to have to either kind of start all over or regroup and figure out where you're at. And then how do you proceed going forward? One example of that is sometimes when you're training for anything, there's injuries that come up and along the way, and those are accepted to a certain degree. So some people give up at that point. A lot of people give up in general. And so they just don't stick around long enough to make it work. Same thing with new strategies in the workplace when it comes to benefit programs. So injuries could be a setback, and you have to maybe adapt and make some changes, change course, right? Sometimes when I'm running a lot, my lower legs will start bothering me to a point where I need to take some days off. And so I'll transition to cycling or I'll just walk, for several miles instead of running. And so just keeping the activity level up, but changing the course from the setback. There will be days and sometimes even weeks or months or years that you'll have to make these changes. You might have to downplay it, right? There's days that I've gotten up and either because of limited time or how I felt or whatever the case might be, I just go out and just do 1 mile, even though I've been training for a 50-mile run. 1 mile is 1 mile down, right? You just start somewhere. It all adds up over a period of time. So if I'm running 50 miles, it's 1 mile at a time. So even when I've completed the 50-mile run, literally to keep motivated, it's 1 mile at a time, 1 foot in front of the other. Just got to keep moving and stay the course. There is an end. You just have to get there. The same thing with trying to make transitions with benefit programs or anything in business, right? 1 step forward, keep moving towards that direction. And there is a path. And I tell you, there's so many times that I've done trail runs for fun, and we're running, and you get lost on the trail. Well, eventually the trail runs comes to an end at some point, and most adults running these trails will figure out along the way where they're at, even if it comes to an exit, and you're like, oh, there's 95th Street, right? Whatever it might be. So it's the same thing in business and also implementing different ideas for the benefit programs to kind of change directions is sometimes you have to stay the course and figure out where the exit is. You could change course again once you get to that exit. You could change your plan, right? You could start all over again. You don't know how many times with my running schedule that I had to readjust because of time restraints or kids' schedules or whatever it might be. You just have to stay the course, just readjust. Same thing with a ship in a storm, right? In the Navy, we're going across what they call the big pond. There's storms that happen on a regular basis. Most of the time it's flat, but there are storms that come through. So we change course, right? And that's probably why most of the time we see it flat, because we avoided the sea storms. But I also think the captain of the ship one time actually went right in the middle of the storm. He said he did it by accident, but I think they did it on purpose for morale purposes, they say. All is good there, but sometimes we do have to change course in order to keep the path. It'll probably take you longer than you expect. Everybody wants short-term gains, and sometimes it doesn't work out as planned. So definitely look longer. You have to stay the course. So back to running, I always felt that it definitely took me longer than the average person, and maybe it didn't. I'm comparing myself to a lot of runners that I see run on a regular basis. They probably went through a lot of the pain and struggles that I'm going through. It could be because I started running the longer distances later in life. It could also just be the complex work schedule that and personal life and hockey schedules and sports, whatever it might be. It just simply takes longer, right? And so we have to adapt to that. The other thing I always say, because I stole it from the military, is called embracing the suck, right? It's going to suck at some point. Even implementing new benefit programs, there's going to be suck points that you're like, why are we doing this again? But you got to push through because you're going to have new light at the end of the tunnel. So you got to keep putting through. But with the running, you can't simply just give up. Same with things in business. It's human nature just to toss your hands up. You don't know how many times people I've met, not only in business, but in the running community, that just finally just toss their hands because it's taken much longer. It sucks. They're not looking forward to the runs in the morning. And so they just have to change the pace. But some of them just give up. They toss their hands. It just takes a lot more money, a lot more energy, a lot more pain in business and life. It's just the way it goes. And our expectations are usually faster than what the reality is. So we just have to stay the course. So with the benefit program, when we're making changes, sometimes we have to embrace the suck because the changes may not be what the popularity contest wins the trophy, if you want to call it that. But, sometimes we have to change the direction. We have to change the mindset. We have to change the procedures, right? If you want a different outcome, I'm telling you, some of these businesses are on the verge of bankruptcy because they don't want to change course. They don't want to take action that may be against everything they ever thought about before. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that their mindset is definitely wrong. And so they always want it easier. Like, it's just so easy to go to the big blue or the big green or the big whatever. It's just always the same way. And there are always expectations that it always should be cheaper. I don't care if I came in with a 1% increase, it's always too much. 1% across the board is hard. It never happens, but somehow people are expecting that it should be zero, right? And at the same time, pay claims, right? It just doesn't exist. What we're trying to do is control everything as a whole. And we talked about it on other podcasts, and I'm going to talk some of the strategies going through here. It shouldn't be so hard. I've heard that. Why is this so hard and complicated? They dread the renewal. They dread even shopping for insurance. They don't want to talk about it. I've had some people that hang up on me because they're just so frustrated with how benefit programs, health insurance, how to implement it, how to deal with employees, right? It's just the fact of life, right? And head into a different direction if you want different outcomes. You have to, just like your employees, you have to educate your employees and give them resources to change the outcome. Same thing with you. Certain brokers are going to provide resources and expectations to change the course to have better outcomes. But it's up to you if you really want to do it, or just pay the higher price, right? Just step on a nail and deal with the pain, right? So it's going to take a little bit longer. It will always be more complex than you expect. It will probably even cost you more in the short term to get to where you need to be in the long run. So to give you an idea, what's more complex is that when you go through a renewal process for a business or even startup, for that matter, there's options of comparison, right? So are we doing ACA, small group? Small groups could still go, the rating could still go up to 50, or in some cases more employees. And so you may still be in the ACA brackets. And then you also got level funded and fully self-funded programs, right? And so getting out of the ACA and moving to a self-funded type product is far better. But again, you have to go through the process. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be against a lot of things that you've been taught for 20 years. It's not going to have the fancy blue logo on the card, but everything's going to work out just fine, right? There's a little bit of faith, but have the resources. Brokers that are working in these spaces will have resources to give you more confidence. And some of it is leading with faith, right? And so sometimes you wake up in the morning, you have to lead in faith that you're going to make it 10 miles that morning because that's what you set out for. And that's what you've been training for. And it's the same thing with a lot of things. You just have to have the faith that everything you've been working on or trying to work on is going to move in the right direction. So you're going to have to spend more time trying to figure out which direction you're going to go and get out of the space that you're in. And definitely changing course and doing something different, you're going to have a lot of pushback. And even yourself, you're probably fighting, hey, but it's not the big blue, or it's not this or not that, right? Like, well, the big blues don't operate in certain spaces to help save money. They're in the business of lack of transparency, more administration costs, but they can't tell you what they're charging. They can't tell you, or they choose not to, should I say. They choose not to show you what the claims are. You could be the most profitable entity that they have, and they're not going to tell you that. They're going to say, oh, based on costs and services, your premiums are going to go up by 10% or 15 or 20, right? They don't give you backing to it and justify it. If your paper costs went up, you would challenge that vendor by shopping around, and you might go to a company you haven't heard of before. But as long as it's supplying the paper you need and its quality is there and the outcomes are what you expected, then why wouldn't you switch? You do that with any other line item, but you won't do it with health insurance. You will probably go bankrupt if you keep doing the course that you're in. I'm going to give you a prime example of that here in a second. And so there will be naysayers along the way. Your employees are going to give you feedback and say, oh, no, we trust this, right? Well, there's no trust when you can't afford the premiums anymore. So either you make changes to change directions, get out of the ACA space, get out of that pricing. It amazes me how many, even 10 and 15 employees could still move out of the ACA brackets. But it amazes me how many employers that have 35 to 45 employees and they're still in that rat race. And they were not asking the challenging questions about where the expenses are going, what can we do to implement to make have our employees make better decisions for better outcomes. In fact, you could eliminate their out-of-pocket expenses and provide an incentive to go to better quality care. There's studies that are coming out over the last year or so, and I shared some of it on this podcast, that there's a indirect proportion to cost and outcomes and positive results for healthcare. And so they are finding today, the more expensive it is, the less the quality of care. The less expensive it is, the better the quality of care. And so it's not that you're going to go buy a better car and get better value. That's different in that market. And I tell you, most markets, if you pay more money, you're going to get more value. In healthcare, for some weird reason, it is the opposite. So once you get out of the ACA space, there will be a lot more reporting. Your CFO will be in heaven looking at these reports, right? You're going to see some of the claim items. You're not going to see them per employee, but you're going to see that there's a spike in prescriptions or a spike in ER visits. Things you could control. When you go to your workers' comp and there's claims going on, the insurance agent, hopefully, if you have a good insurance agent, or the insurance company will actually come back and say, hey, you're making a lot of claims in this area. We need to figure out a way to implement better strategies so you have less claims. That's why OSHA exists, right? But the same thing with benefits. We find it easy to make the excuse that, well, it's just the way healthcare is. Like, I'm just going to accept it, right? But if you actually knew that there was a way to control some of your expenses and keep your costs lower and reverse the trend of healthcare because of a little bit of education or implementing a new program for your employees, could save you tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, or in some cases, millions of dollars worth of premium savings just because you implemented a small little program, invested a little bit of time to make sure your employees are aware of something. But right now you're clueless. You're just flying in the dark and you have no idea where to land, and you just keep flying until you run out of gas. And that's essentially running out of money. There are companies all over the country, employers that is, are going bankrupt. As we speak, as I record this, they're on the verge of bankruptcy, if not already closed their doors, because healthcare expenses have gone through the roof and they have no control mechanism. Healthcare costs are still going to continue to keep going up. People are using healthcare in America. It's just the way it goes. But if you had a lever that you knew you could pull to help control some of the costs and either reverse it completely or just slow the rate of inflation to the premium cost, then why wouldn't you want to do that? So more transparency on even prescription drugs, what the actual cost is. There are times where your insurance is way overpaying on a prescription drug and you have no idea. And then there's rebates, right? The rebates in the pharmaceutical world, holy smokes, right? In a fully insured program, a lot of times the rebates are going back to the insurance company because they're ultimately paying the lion's share of the bill. And so their cost is really nothing, and it should be going back to the consumer or the employer, right? Go back to the health plan that's paying for it. But in a fully insured Affordable Care Act type plan, or even fully insured large group, I'll tell you. So even with the big companies, even though there's a little bit more of claims going on, but the administrative cost and what they're getting kickbacks on, they're not disclosing it. And I tell you, and there's recent laws that require insurance brokers, such as myself, benefits personnel, that we have to disclose what we make off an account if it's over $1,000 a year. And most of our accounts are. And so we have to disclose that to them. But the insurance company is not required to tell you where their income is. We even have to tell you indirect income related to your policy. So if we're making a bonus or if we're getting a kickback, we're supposed to disclose that to you now. Whether or not it happens is a different story, and we can bring somebody on to talk about that. That's a really interesting, touchy subject. But insurance companies are not required to tell you where their source of income is related to your account. So somehow it's transparency for me, but not for them. And so you're going to be overpaying on administrative costs. You have no idea what they're charging for it. Whereas if you even just move to level funded, you'll see a lot of the administration costs. You may not be able to negotiate much on a level funded, but on a fully insured, most likely you can, because you could actually blow the plan up and piece it back together. If you don't like the third-party administrator, you could fire them. Keep everything else, fire them, and move to another third-party administrator. If you don't like the pharmacy vendor that you're using, fire them and move to something else. If you don't like they call stop loss insurance, if you don't like the insurance company backing it for some reason, whether it's due to cost or the way the sales guy is or whatever it might be, you could fire them and move to another stop loss carrier, right? And we'll bring another self-funded, maybe a third-party administrator come in and talk about all the gears that come into self-funded world. It can be complex. I always say that if you close the current, kind of like in Wizard of Oz, you close the current, you got the wizard, and there's a certain expectation. You could visually see a lot of things. That's where I think our industry needs to do a little bit more explaining. And then behind closed doors, it gets really confusing. There's a lot of levers. There's a lot of things going on. Just take baby steps. You can't run from 0 to 100 miles. So why would you expect that in a benefits plan? It's just 1 mile at a time.
Hey, gang. Ever wonder what it's like to be a small business owner? It's confusing. Weird expenses coming out of nowhere. And when you throw in health insurance, forget it. Nobody understands how that works. If you own a business, big or small, it's one of the biggest expenses you have all year long. And yet, we all wait until open enrollment at the end of the year, and then we think to ourselves, next year I'll get a jump on it. And then it's another year of paying way too much. If you're a business owner, big or small, HR representative that wants to impress the boss, give Butch Zemar of Elite Benefits of America a call. Save yourself or your boss thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars a year. Reach out to Butch right now, 708-535-3006, or shoot him an email, butch@elitebenefits.net. And be sure to check out the Zemar podcast. Don't wait till the last minute. Put Butch Zemar to work for you now.
All right, case study, 100 employees, roughly, give or take. There might have been a little bit more on payroll at some point, but they're in a fully insured program right now, a big name company. In our industry, we call them the BUCAs, right? And so BUCAHS. Now, H is gone. Humana's exiting the market. We should probably have a podcast on that. They're going to focus on Medicare, so BUCA. And so they're just initials for the big ones. They do take the lion's share of the marketplace, but they're not everywhere. There's tons of insurance companies out there. But in this case, it was a fully insured. We stayed with the fully insured based on a number of things. So it wasn't just price. It wasn't access to care. It was a whole bunch of things we put together. So what we did was we restructured the plan designs. They are cookie cutter. There's no customization on these. But we changed the offering to the employees to grant more flexibility. And so I think we went from 2 plans to 5 plans. And yes, it's a lot, but I'm telling you, it gave a lot more flexibility for the employees to kind of make some changes and their decision making and how they go about this. And so it definitely helped them a ton. So we provide them resources and tools to do provider searches, right? We held a Q&A session, question and answer, kind of like a town hall. And then we provided some educational pieces to help make better decisions. The group, in this case, even though we were still on a fully insured, they end up, because employees made different decisions based on new information, overall, even though there was a 10% increase that year, they actually reversed and saved 25% off the renewal. Obviously, all we did was make some little modifications. It's the same thing where we're not running the 10 miles, right? We're changing the way we train. We're training ourselves to have better outcomes. We're going in different directions. It was actually really hard at first. You have no idea how many employees were in an uproar about changing benefits. But the employer had to do something, right? The employees are complaining how much they're being charged. The employer is getting tight because revenue is not where it should be after COVID. So they were running into some issues. So we even field, as our agency, we field more calls from that particular employer, their employees, based on their questions because they just couldn't take it or didn't understand some of the questions. So they went to us. We don't get that involved. We organize certain events, but we don't take phone calls from employees of employers without exceptions. And so we did have another Q&A session. We did, because there were so many phone calls coming in, we decided just to have another Q&A town hall meeting and then kind of go through things. And we had to remind the employees of the resources throughout the year. The next renewal, 10% increase. And so, yeah, we're still on a fully insured. It will always go up. The average has been 10%, at least in Chicago. And so there was a roughly 10% increase, but we're still below the year before, right? We didn't really make any plan designs. In fact, in this case, since it was a 10% increase, the employer actually just ate the cost, kept the premiums the same as for the employees out of their paycheck. So nothing changed for the employees. The employer ate the increase. The second year was a 9.2% increase. So we're still going back up. So although the premiums went up, we were still below the market from if we just left everything the same, which is what they were doing for 10 years, mind you. And so they made some, because they were forced into the ACA plans. And so they really didn't do much different than switch to an ACA plan. So in the third year, we went from an ACA plan to a level funded plan. And essentially what a level funded is versus a self-funded is employers are paying for claims on a regular basis. So the output of money is up and down each month, and a third-party administrator pays the claim, and then you reimburse the third-party administrator. Sometimes they set up trust funds for this and basically pay themselves premiums, and then whatever's left in the pool, they can reallocate to premiums later in the future or for other claims. So a level funded takes an anticipated claim based on the risk model or the risk of the group, because there's some underwriting involved, and they just say, okay, we expect, I'm making this up, $50,000 a year in claims. So they divide it by 12 months, add it to the premium, so they were prepaying it. And so that makes it a little bit more level. And then if they don't use all that money, you actually get a portion of that prorated amount back. And so that's one advantage of level funded, is that your premiums stay consistent throughout the year. But if you don't use it all, you get some of it back. We had a 5-life group one time. This was just 2022. They got a refund check. So from the previous year, 2021 to 2022, they got a check. And so again, 5 lives on the plan. They didn't really make any claims at all. And so they got a $12,000 check. I mean, just it paid for like a month or 2 months of premium or something like that. And so they were ecstatic, right? Like, so yeah, they still had an increase in the premiums, but they essentially cut it in half. I think it was a 9% or something increase. So now they have a 4% increase if you look at it that way. So we moved to a level funded plan in this case, and we saved 22%. So we're back to similar pricing than a couple of years ago. So it's almost like you had a decrease in insurance in your back, like your premiums never changed for 2 years, essentially. So we went that route. And then if we were to compare it to the strategy the other broker essentially was doing, they would have been almost paying double. So essentially they're paying 48% less by making the strategy changes and then moving to a level funded plan than if they just stayed the course on where they were going. So they would have almost doubled their premium. It's crazy to think that way. I mean, this is a larger group. I mean, smaller cases are going to be smaller, and in bigger cases, maybe the risk model is not there. Maybe there's high risk in the group. In this case, it worked out for their benefit. So stay the course, embrace the suck for sure, learn new information, get second opinions from professionals, and validate some of the new information. You're going to head down a road you've never been through before. Get out of your own way. A lot of times employers get in their own way. Like, they just so gung-ho on certain things that they can't. So let me tell you that there's more loyalty to insurance companies. For us, like consumers to insurance companies, it's a one-way street. You're loyal to them. They're only loyal to your money.